Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community is a nonprofit organization that is committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles as introduced by Sydney Banks to people throughout the world. And today's webinar is with Cherie Ray, and her topic is self-consciousness, a hitch in your giddy-up. This will be a fun conversation looking at self-consciousness and what role it plays in your life. So Cherie is a coach and a consultant to business leaders, teams, couples, and individuals who want to live a more richly connected life with more resilience and creative potential. She teaches people how to eliminate struggle from their lives.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for showing up for this conversation. It's great to see all these familiar faces. So thank you. Thank you. So my topic today is on self-consciousness. And the title came to me just, my mind seems to have a sense of humor where I'm concerned. And so the title came out of the blue about a hitch in your giddy up, because what I noticed was self-consciousness. I just got real curious about self-consciousness. And so before I launch into what it looked like for me, I would love to open the floor and for you to just speak freely about what self-consciousness looks like to you, or how it might show up in your life, and how you would define it. So if anybody'd like to jump in, I'd love to hear
You
what
could
self.
raise your hand and unmute yourself. That would be great.
Thanks, Lynn. That'd be great. Maureen, Marlene, it's good to see you.
Hi, Sherry. I love this topic because it's sort of, we could probably co-write the book on it. But what I noticed for me about self-consciousness is a couple of instances. One of them, I started teaching aerobics many, many years ago. And I realized for the first couple of years, it was all about me. Like, how did I look? How was my music? What did they think of my routines? And it took some time for me to kind of transfer my attention over to the participants in the class. So, to really be aware of how they were responding and what they needed in the moment. So I would say for me, it was the self-consciousness. It was just really more attention on me rather than the people I was there to teach or to serve.
Thank you. Thank you, Maureen.
Ellen has her hand up.
Hi, Sharon. Hi, everyone. Self-consciousness, like I think about like it's this rush of discomfort and this like backpedaling feeling or fixing, like it just feels like a rush of get me the F out of here. And then followed by like a need to sometimes explain or justify or correct or update, not for myself, but for others. So I had a very, very recent intense experience in a very large public setting. Yes, just yesterday. Some of you were probably there. And I just also want to say, like, I saw how captivating it was to get in it and to go over it. And I was like, well, I know what's going to happen if I do that. I know I'm going to feel worse. Why don't we just come back into the moment and see what happens? So it may have been more than what you asked, but I was compelled to share that.
No, I love hearing how the topic of self-consciousness rests on people's minds. Know? Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you. Yes, Monica.
Just unmute yourself.
Okay. Well, I teaching art again. It's like creativity and well-being. And I think when we do classes where people get in awkward positions, because I'm sort of bringing to learn to draw, is sort of getting past what they think they can do. So it's always an awkward space, but I think it's very valuable to, so being self-conscious is kind of like being awkward. So that's what I'm teaching, but I'm learning as I, but even the fact that I'm teaching again and I'm exhibiting my art, I asked for help, and that helped me get over the hurdle of, but it's really good for me to, I don't know, but listening to everyone sort of encourages me, all these
Absolutely.
webinars to be aware and that it's okay to be self-conscious, but we all hinder ourselves by not jumping over that hurdle to have a new experience, even if it's goofy and like Ellen, or I think that's, even if it's kind of awkward, I think that's even getting used to feeling awkward, and not make, it's that having that experience sort of and not being afraid of it.
Yeah.
Anyways, thanks for letting me talk.
Thank you. Thank you. So that was, oh, please, Kenrit, I'm not sure I can say your name right.
That's all right. Kinneret.
Kenrit, thank you.
Yeah. I can see that it comes up. A friend of mine asked me to sort of conduct a funeral service. And I've not done that before. And it's for her. And immediately I noticed that, I can't do this. There's no way, blah, 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 and I just, so it's like all these voices that come up about what I can't do, what's out of my scope, on and on. I ended up saying, sure, sure, I'll do it. But I, was all this, oh my God, I'm not this, I'm not that. Yeah. And I also do hospice calls. I work as a spiritual care provider. I'm not a chaplain, I'm not religious. But sometimes I make phone calls and again, I have nerves coming up about, I'm not going to know what to say and I'm not going to know what to do. And, so it just basically makes, if I pay attention to that, it makes my life experience much more contracted and nervous and disturbed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we live in that feeling, as if it's true. So that what came to me just via an insight was that self-consciousness for me was, I just saw that self-consciousness for me was me having a lot of me on my mind. And then I kind of laughed as I was about to get on this call. I said, here I am getting self-conscious about having a conversation about having a lot of me on my mind. So it was like a double down, which I thought was kind of hilarious. The many layers of how much of me can I have on my mind. So that's what it just, I noticed. It's like, gosh, I have a lot of me on my mind. And for me, my particular flavor of having a lot of me on my mind was, it would stop me from engaging with inspirations and fresh ideas that came, those fresh ideas that are out of the blue, or they seem like that was for somebody else, but not for me, or, these things that are, I call it pure inspiration, because you're like, no. So, so I was going to invite you, to kind of notice or even reflect for a second about what's the flavor of self-consciousness in your life. You know, is it just if we can get onto our own flavor, or even invite awareness into what's the flavor of my self-consciousness, whether it's doubt, or how am I doing, or how's that going to work, or um, noticing if you're like incredibly sensitive to the opinion of others, or totally concerned with feeling vulnerable. You know, there there's a limitless number of ways you could experience self-consciousness, but I think it's a great opportunity to kind of check in and see, depending on the situation, who knows, could have different flavors. But for me, I saw like kind of a dominant flavor of don't do it, don't engage, you know, because I couldn't either control the outcome, or what if it was a total failure? What if I put the energy into it and it flopped, wasn't well received, all these kind of things. But what happened was I just noticed that self-consciousness was a whole lot of thought that I didn't see as thought. It kind of felt like it was so subtle that it really felt like this was a feasibility study in real life, that it was really life giving me feedback on engaging with the inspirations that were coming. So kind of like in this moment, when you reflect on your own self-consciousness on any particular situation, and I'd even call Ellen out just because it was fresh from yesterday. Ellen, if you just shared kind of like what was the flavor of, for you, what was the flavor of yesterday's self-consciousness?
Can we rewind and edit me out? Well, I'm sitting here reflecting on kind of my journey of self-consciousness and how helpful this understanding has been. And I'm really seeing all the times that I just see my personal mind doing its thing so masterfully. And when I see it as that, I kind of just, it just doesn't stay with me. So it's interesting right now. I see how I'm like almost avoiding the question by talking about by talking about something else. But if you will give me a minute to like go there and like, so what was the flavor of discomfort? I think the flavor is righteousness. I need to prove that I'm okay, that I'm right, that I'm okay. That's the flavor for me. I'm okay. I need to know that for me, and I need to let the world know that I was right, or is that true? And I'm like, that may have been true in the past. I don't even know if it's true. Like, I think I also had a flavor of like humility, like, but in a sweet way. Like it was like, oh yeah, like me too.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I think in the kind of just reflecting and checking on the flavor of it is like inviting awareness in there to where it can be really a support to who you are versus kind of, to me, like a silent discourager.
Mm-hmm.
Something that would take you out of the game or keep you from engaging in the nature of life, which is pure potential and pure possibility.
I would say I'm Neapolitan. I can go in, or like I could have a crossplate. Like I felt like, oh, I'm never going to show, like I had that, like, oh, never speak up again. And I also had that, no, speak up and show something else about who you are. Like I was just witnessing that, like this extreme. And I was just like, wow, you are so clever at how you you know, which is so much nicer than, like, I don't know, my self-criticism has really reduced, and I just get like really more humored by what I'm doing.
That's a good point. I think you can get more humored by what your mind is up to.
Yeah.
And that's this part about like really being more aware about I just say the cleverness of our personal thinking and how many ways it can get us to take the bait and hook us. And we don't even see it happening. And all the while it's so innocent to take the bait, all the while it at least from what I look at with self-consciousness in my world always has limitation attached to it.
Totally.
You know, it doesn't have an invitation to it. It has limitation to it. So I don't know if self-consciousness shows up for you as an invitation, I say, lucky you.
Well, but the invitation might be it comes out of like proving something. It's not really, okay, like, oh, I don't know if it's true now, but in the past it would have been like, okay, this is like overcorrection.
Oh, got it. Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah. Thanks so much for the conversation. And did I answer your question after
Yes, you did. Thank you. And thank you for letting me put you on the spot as to push you out in the front of the line. So thank you for that.
I'm happy to. And I'm really excited to hear what other people have to say too.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come in to share a little bit about the flavor of your self-consciousness? Melanie.
Hey, Cherie.
Hi.
Yeah, I think for me, it's I was just reflecting on what Ellen was saying as well, actually. And first of all, I just want to say, Ellen, like, good for you yesterday. I was on that call and it was awesome to see you be in that moment. And it just struck me that you really held yourself in that moment and you didn't shrink from it. And I really saw that in you. So, and what I'm about to say is my self-consciousness sometimes stops me from speaking up in those large groups. And the flavor is like a fear of being wrong. Like, it's funny, like I've done all this work about right and wrong, and there is no right and wrong. And I genuinely believe that in like a really like higher consciousness way of like, there are no mistakes, there's no right, there's no wrong. But when I'm about to be in a sort of high pressured or visible situation, I go right back into that like unconsciousness of default behavior of like, oh no, what if I say something wrong, or I don't fit into the picture, if that makes sense. So it's funny how it's so primal. It's so sort of unconscious, you know. There's just this thing there that really, maybe that's what you're saying, Cherie, as well. It's like it catches you, your thinking hooks you back into that lower level of consciousness, and you kind of go into those default behaviors. So
I love your word primal, Melanie, because it's primal. Even to me, just suggests such an innocence, you know, not a fault or not something that needs to be corrected. It's just seeing it, you know, just opening to it or opening your eyes to it. But that the primal nature of what you said too about, or at least what I think I heard was like, anytime that we're, you know, stepping out, you know, whether it's in speaking on a call or stepping out to respond to some new inspiration, and that if we caught on more that stepping out is easy enough to evoke insecurity because we're stepping out on a ledge we don't know exists. You know what I mean? So we're stepping out, and if we get more aware, more comfortable that insecurity is just part of stepping out beyond what's known or familiar, then maybe that assuages some of that primal instinct to retract. Yeah. Kind of like, I always like that visual of a turtle head, you know what I mean? Like, coast has to be so clear for a turtle to poke its head out. And then if it's the slightest little rumble of something, you know, so then to me, that that's equivalent to like the slightest little bit of insecure thinking or doubt that seems real. It all goes back in the shell and rethinks it for a good long while before it comes back out.
But do you think it's that like push and pull between like being a human and the natural traits of a human, right? And being spiritual and seeing a bigger picture, particularly in this community, right? We see our experience, we have an awareness, we have a consciousness. And I think I get a little bit intolerant of my humanness sometimes, like, why am I still having a really bad day or not raising my hand or falling foul of the human experience when I can see it what it is? So there's something in that impatience sometimes I experience with that.
Oh, totally. That, somehow I got in that line thinking, the more I know, the less I'll have to experience, humanness. and then I was gravely disappointed when I didn't get a hall pass for, the human part of it. It was like, oh no, it just comes on double at that point. So no, it makes perfect sense to me. Perfect sense to me. Anybody else want to share about their?
I'll chime in.
Hey, Stephen.
Yeah, I've been stricken with that malady of self-consciousness myself. I have been in settings where I knew that it was competent. I knew that it had something to say, but would be hit by this notion that somehow I would not be able to say it well, that others might judge me. And I mean, to the point where I would almost lose. I remember wanting to ask a speaker a question, and it was like I was losing my breath, and I could not even complete my sentence because of the self-consciousness. It wasn't because I was incompetent, it's just that I had this notion, this feeling that somehow I wasn't good enough. So yeah, I have had that.
Yep. That's a great flavor to get on to. I think that's a great flavor to get onto, Stephen. I also think another one that's such a great flavor to get onto is the notion that if you're a complete and total fraud, and if they knew who you really were, you wouldn't have a friend in the world, or there'd be no one to have lunch with. I think that one is so funny. Where somehow the more you kind of relax, the more you think you know nothing and you're a complete fraud. But that's another, to me, flavor of self-consciousness that seems to be pretty prevalent across the board. And it seems real, it seems so real. Yeah. Anybody else? Lindy Lou.
Pushing the wrong button. Yeah, definitely the whole fraud thing. And also what comes up for me is, well, I don't know. But what I noticed, because this actually happened to me this morning, and I said, well, so what? I mean, I was just flabbergasted. And, I started criticizing myself, and I said, well, that all sounds so familiar. I thought it was a big gift, And so that's how it comes up for me. Well, I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know, I just don't know the next step.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And well, I mean, yeah. And the humor, I'm starting to laugh at myself, not like in a derogatory way, but the human part, just think it's funny as opposed to, oh my God. But I think advancing age is very helpful in that sense, because I've run into it before. But what could happen to me if I didn't know? I could find out.
Yeah. I love that. I'm thinking that the notion of advancing age is kind of could be the antidote to self-consciousness, in the sense of like, well, if not now, when? My clock might be ticking. So maybe I can just get over myself or get over my thinking about this and do it. So I think I love your quote, advancing age. So, which is happening to us at any age, but it's not exactly have to have a number associated with it. Yes.
And thank you for inviting me. Sorry. Thank you for inviting me. This is just a total treat.
Oh, thank you, Linda. Thanks for coming. Yes.
I noticed definitely a flavor of, you know, if at work, if I make a mistake, if I haven't been sensitive enough, I said something and someone hurt, you know, or took it personally, you know, whether as a coach or as a spiritual care provider at hospice, or I asked the question that they are not comfortable speaking about and they let me know, I notice immediately I have a, you know, this thing, oh, you're such a novice, you know, you've got so much to learn. Gosh, your skills are like terrible. I mean, you know, it just, you know, that's where it goes. How could you be this insensitive? So
No,
that
that's
was.
great. And I think even the like even reflecting on this is self-consciousness on my part, but you think about the hot topics of death, you know what I mean? And all that you could say wrong around that, or all you could say wrong about so many things, but how some topics seem to be a hot topic and we don't have the words or even know how to talk about it.
Or I might ask something, you know, and say the word death, and the person might just have such a big reaction. I don't want to talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's the, couldn't you find another way of saying it? Could you?
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So I was thinking like how to in that, you know, so often we go, okay, well, give me a how, give me a how, give me a how. And especially in this in this understanding, the how in my mind is in engaging, you know, and in what I say by engaging is like just taking the next easiest, simplest, obvious step. And most of the time we do the next easiest, simplest, obvious step without thinking about it. And then our mind makes up we haven't done anything, you know, but you did move. You know, you were moving, you were responding to life, but the mind doesn't take it as a legitimate action on your part. So that's kind of like when I think about the how. It's another piece is I think self-consciousness a lot of times has you looking at the finished product or the end game or the destination, and you miss the middle part. You know, there's this big juicy middle part of engaging, responding, engaging, responding, engaging, responding, in that, which what I like to think of as like an agenda-less gap, where you may not have a strong agenda, you don't know what your next steps are, but with this understanding is like you engage and something comes, you engage and something comes, you engage and something comes. But too often in our self-consciousness, we'll park on the sidelines in our self-consciousness and think about it a little bit more, thinking we can think through to the end product. And then when I think it through, I'll get to the end product and then I'll take action. Well, all of that is basically writing a fiction novel. You know, it's all fiction. It's all made up. There's nothing really real at all in that, other than enlisting your thinking to create a story of possibility. Because in real time, it happens differently. In real time, something very fresh could occur to you that wasn't on your, you know, wasn't even in the scope of what I'll say your conditioned mind had in the realm of possibility. But in this understanding, we know that mind is of service to us at all times. There's a higher intelligence in service to us at all times. And to me, that shows up in real time by engaging, by taking some sort of action to be able to get real information on how to follow. You know, what's the next step? Otherwise, it's made up. Otherwise, we do a lot of, to me, sitting the bench, waiting for conditions to be right to engage with anything. How does that sound to you? Does that sound real and true? Does it sound ridiculous? Thanks, Ellen. Does it sound-
Hi, can I
Hi.
speak?
Yes,
I
please.
didn't put chat or anything. Well, what I'm going to recently is seeing that it was a thought. It's a little tricky. You know, it's like getting in before the thought. Well, that I hope to do. But just say it was a story, a very short sentence, but I told myself and I listened. And then I followed instructions.
Mhm.
So, you know, that's kind of what I'm trying to see. Well, where did that feeling come? Well, okay, it's back to that. Where did that feeling come from? That's so hard to do sometimes. But it is listening to the feeling, you know, but it's tricky. Because then you try to unravel it and then it gets even more complicated.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
It is simple, but let's get it simple. But I
exactly.
guess listening to the feeling is the simplest you can get.
I like that. I like the idea too of, or at least it looks this way to me. Y'all tell me, but if it looks complex, I know I have taken the elevator to the top of my head, you know, that I am all up in my head about it if it looks complex, because somewhere out there, there's a very simple reality around the situation, but my mind just doesn't let me see it at that time. So if it feels complex, that's my, when it does wake me up, it's like, oh, okay. Okay.
Oh, great. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I think that, and that little piece too is, if we could, you know, kind of take our eye off of what we believe to be the destination, you know, because even if the desired destination is made up via today's thinking. So it's like, but you notice that once you really engage with something, more times than not, it turns to be a bigger experience, a more real experience, a greater experience, something that happened because you engaged that brought you something you couldn't have imagined.
Mhm.
You know, there might have been a richness feeling, a connection to it. Who knows? But in the engagement, it's great to have a target. But I say in that place of like you might have a target as a starting place, but to fall in love with the process of playing with this target and leaving it open for what's, you know, we'll leave it open for, I like that idea of this or something better, you know, just to leave it open, because if I've got a pin in the map, that's what I'm using, what I know to, what I believe to be possible to me. And we know that in this understanding that there's so much more possible to us than what our mind can conceive. So engage with the inspiration, start, but also keep the door open for something even a better fit for you to happen. And it might make the ride a little smoother because you'll fall in love with the process of engaging. And what I love about the falling in love with the process of engaging versus the outcome, which tends to generate all that thinking about how am I doing and how's it going to work out and how am I going to look, the self-consciousness of it, that if you fall in love with the process of engaging, you can be happy at any moment. You're not happy only if it worked out how you made up it needed to work out. So you can find that place, that center in your peace and joy and whatever you want to call it. It's like I could enjoy this whole ride versus just waiting until I get things, you know, right to get what my mind thinks is available to me.
listening to George on Discovery, I think he experienced and then he spoke to the process. I really like you saying process. One day he spoke about free will. And I'm sitting there thinking, there's a lot of thinking going on about this. But I didn't say anything. But then I was in a group and George was in the group. And I said, well, isn't free will like, you react and then you pause and then you reflect. Like there's a choice. And then I put on one of Sid's tapes, and that's exactly what he said. There's a choice. But the last meeting, George apologizing for bullshitting. But he was in the process of discovering that he had bullshitted. And I saw his bullshit, but I didn't say anything because he's George. But I kind of thought we're really struggling here. Like it's a lot of work to figure out what. Anyways, then he told a wonderful story about being called to work with hyperactive children. This is early in his development. And they were really hyper. You went in, it was like so noisy, and he couldn't teach. But then he went home and he reflected that they wouldn't listen to bullshit. Like he pulled it in, like his own experience of bullshit, him bullshitting, and then these students teaching him. So he had to go to heartfelt feeling, is what, because he noticed really sometimes they were quiet. So he had to study this, he had to process. And then as he reflected and processed, he went in again and he took a mentor, and the mentor says, we can't do anything here. It's just noise. But George, I don't know what he spoke about, but he observed that they would quiet if he wasn't bullshitting. So that was low. I had a real huge learning from him being honest.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's one of the things that I admire so much about George is that he's a great teacher of me of how you can live with so little of yourself on your mind and just show up and be real. He really shows up and he's himself, and he, from the outside, I don't know what's going on the inside, but on the outside, he just doesn't look like he has a lot of him on his mind. And I find that very inspiring. You know? Anybody else have anything you'd like to share?
Cherie, can I ask you, who's George?
George Pransky, who is
Yeah, you've given me some of his tapes. Okay,
yes,
okay,
and
thank
the
you.
relationship handbook.
Yes, okay, thanks, Angel.
You're welcome.
I'm listening to myself here throughout from the very beginning. I've been so self-conscious, wanting to put up my hand and then putting it back down. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is so interesting that we're dealing with this subject. And for me, it happens a lot of times and it results in withholds. But very interesting, Cherie, that you talk about this outcome that is created by the mind, this desired outcome that then one doesn't even take the first step. Because I'm thinking of a small place where it shows up, like right now in my country, in my community, people are really struggling as there's a lot happening here and lots of losses, etc. And just I'm finding that out of self-consciousness, I'm not reaching out to these friends because I'm thinking, what if I say the wrong thing? Already I have an outcome intended and it stops me from reaching out. But in those moments where I've picked up the phone and reached out to a person, I mean, the truth is, whatever will emerge in the time that we engage. But when I've thought it through too much, then I end up not engaging at all. So it's a very interesting and even great suggestion for me, because I'm thinking, actually, just take that first initial step, acknowledge it when you take it, and see what comes up. So yeah, thank you for this. This is very, very useful for me. I mean, I'm sitting here putting up my hand and almost pulling it down, and yeah, thank you.
I'm so glad you did. I'm so glad you did, because I think you speak for all of us, you know, and taking the simplest action about when somebody even crosses your mind and you don't call them, You know, you don't send that email, or you don't just reach out just because, you know, I mean, I can listen to my mind say, oh, don't bother them. Don't bother them, you know? So I know that that's one of the flavors of my own thinking is like, oh no, that don't bother them. Don't bother them. And then it couldn't be farther from the truth. You know, you reach out and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so great. We haven't connected in a while. And it once again, the thinking is completely exposed as caca, but it still feels as believable when it comes on the scene. Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you spoke up. Totally. Anybody else have anything that's come to mind on this? Just the self-consciousness, just the role it plays in your life, that it doesn't look like thinking, you know? It looks like life giving you feedback. Yes.
A curiosity that is evoked, though, for me, is could it also have a characteristic of serving us, in the sense that perhaps we then would be measured in how we engage and not just throw ourselves in there. And I don't know, I'm just.
I think it's worth exploring, because it feels to me like if the self-consciousness serves you to feel hopeful about life, or looking in the direction of potential or possibility, it feels to me like that would, I would drink the Kool-Aid on that. And I'm trying to push away the self-consciousness that looks like it's limited, has limitation attached to it. But that's, I say, launch your own inquiry on it and see how that feels for you. But that's how it just looks like for me.
Already feels like Kool-Aid, because it is me being full of myself, actually. So yeah, I wonder how it would serve, but it's something worth looking at.
Yeah, I think so. And not to make us wrong, and not to make it, not to make a problem out of it, not to get self-conscious about being self-conscious, but I think the part about becoming aware that it's, like I said, it's not life giving you feedback. And then I also think another part that's so helpful to see too is when we put when our mind goes into action on these, what I'm calling kind of feasibility studies, then it also generates consequences off of this fictional story. And what I think is so great too, that if those consequences didn't exist in your mind ahead of time, or if they weren't a big deal, would they even still be consequences?
Ooh. Wow.
I know if the consequences weren't made of, what's a consequence? I would say that's a better way to put a question mark on the end about like, what's a consequence? And it's like, well, might not be one. There might not be a downside. Joyce.
Are you saying, if you don't just step out and engage, then you're not going to find out if the consequence that you imagined is true or not?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And then also the notion that, here's another piece of it, the notion you couldn't survive the consequence or thrive in that consequence, that if that looks predetermined, that's made up too. Because, we have that innate resilience that helps us rise to any occasion. So it's like if we were more grounded in knowing that I don't know how it's going to work, but it will come to me at the time, or I'm good no matter what. You know, it may not look like anything I think ahead of time, but something will come to me at the time that at the time that I engage and something happens, something will come to me. But, you know, you're kind of good no matter what. Like there's not a downside to anything. That's another potential way to hold it, because you're good no matter what. You're resilient. The spiritual nature behind life is going to come to support you in those moments. And we've all had those experiences where we never thought we could navigate things, and somehow we find ourselves on the other side of it and don't know how it happened. And the kind of the surprising part is we are on the other side of it. So we do have that resilience, that capacity to respond to any consequence. I put consequence in air quotes because, you know, sometimes it gets put as a good or a bad thing, but it might just be a thing. You know, might just be a thing.
So can I say something?
Yes, Rachel, please.
Hi. So, of course, I was sitting and realizing I had a lot of thought and judgment and, a lot of thinking, should I talk, should I not talk, and all of that. And what just occurred to me after what you said about the consequences was that I'm either inside out or outside in. And when I'm inside out, everything is fine. And there's no thought and everything flows and it's fine. When I'm outside in, then it matters how I look and if I'm dressed and how my hair is and how many wrinkles I have and what I say. And I mean, the list keeps on going on and on and on and on and on. And who is in the room, who is not, who is listening, who is camera on or camera. I mean, like the list is like endless. And it's very interesting. It's kind of like, we talked yesterday in the group. I'm also in the discoveries, and Erin was the facilitator in the room, and we talked about this consciousness about doing stuff, and and it's very much the same. It's how sometimes things are being done and there's no thought about it, and sometimes I said, it looks like I need to climb the Mount Everest, in order for me to just fold some laundry. It's that simple. It's like it becomes like such a big task. And when am I going to do it? And how am I going to do it? And how long and how much energy? I mean, and again, the thinking about it becomes so enormous. And then sometimes I just do it and I'm like, oh my God, it took a minute. It took 5, it was nothing. What was I thinking about so much? And it's just, to me, it's becoming very fascinating. What I also observed, about like the age, what was, and I have a age/cancer situation here. And so how I look, became less important. And it's almost like I had to come into agreement with myself that I'm okay no matter what, even if my hair is falling out or I have wrinkles or, I'm tired, circles out, whatever it is, my skin is breaking out because of chemo, that doesn't determine, it doesn't matter anymore. It just doesn't matter, and I show up. Yes, when they catch me on camera and I see, why is it always the bad side that shows up with the one crooked tooth? When I'm smiling, that's the one that comes up always. And the smile is magnificent. I go right away to where the tooth is crooked. And, but even with that, I had like a little bit of a perspective with photos of like, in 5 years, not even in 10, in 5 years, I would see how wonderful I was. So why not enjoy it now? Because in 5 years, I would like, oh my God, I looked so good. And I'm like, okay, well, why can't I say it right here, right now? Mm-hmm. Some days I can, some days I can't, but it's getting better. But it's very, it's part of our human experience. And I know that in the past it had some significance. Like like we were taught that there was some social thing of like, you need to respect, and you don't speak up in school unless you know. And we were ashamed, and I'm sure most of us my age and older were ashamed for not saying the right thing and answering the right answer in school. And so it's a learned experience that is in the past. That is totally in the past, but it's so like when you said about the flavors, I'm like, well, let's say all of the above plus. It's very much circumstantial. It's very much what is the environment, what is the event, but it's more important to see that I'm reacting like that. I'm not responding, I'm reacting because I'm not inside out. I'm tired, I'm upset, I'm, hungry, whatever it is, that I'm not in my center. I'm not in the true self, like connected to my true self. And so the old self, like what I like to call it, the old Rachel shows up, and it's not pretty. It can be really challenging for everyone, me included.
Yeah. So that helps like I said, I hope it helps to be curious about the flavor, because that's all that it is. That's all that it is. And not to let the flavor distract you as truth. We all have it. It's all innocent. We all have memories. We all have concerns about the future, but that's all that it is. It's just a flavor that can, flood your sensory system, give you butterflies in your tummy and everything else, but that's all that it is. That's all that it is. It's not true. It's not life giving you a dose of truth.
Cherie, I just had this thought. I don't know if I'm muted or not. When you were talking, Rachel, it just filled me with such joy, and I remembered myself, some of your descriptions, but as a young child in Catholic school, you could never turn your back on the nuns. So when you walked out of the classroom, you had to turn around and back out. And I used to think that was just, wow. But listening to you about yourself, it just filled me with joy. I don't know what I just did,
Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So, the notion of waking up to your self-consciousness, if it's a hitch in your giddy up, meaning is it inhibiting your engagement with life? Is it stopping you from following inspirations? Are you allowing a lot of second, third, and fourth thoughts to be considered before you take an easy, simple next step in the direction of something? That was my whole intention of this conversation, of just hopefully shining a light on self-consciousness as another way of life limiting thought that looks, because it's been with us all our life probably, that tends to resemble truth versus just something we've carried as true for ourselves. So thank you all for coming. Thank you all for making time in your schedule and for participating in this conversation, and for the 3PGC that makes these an abundance of information available. And I invite you all to go to 3pcgc.com global community to see how much information is available on there. It's a depth of information. I don't know how long it would take you to go through all the information on that site, but there's a lot of information on that site. And I want to say thank you to them for sponsoring this, and thank you all for showing up and making this a rich conversation.
Can you repeat that name again, please, Cherie? 3B?
3principlesglobalcommunity.com, but it's 3pgc.com.
So it's
Or org.
org. Yep.
Okay. Because yeah, if you do, I'll do the com, and then it shows up like some crazy Korean language. So yeah, it's org. I always get it wrong, and then I have to go do it again. So there you go. But Lynn, is that right?
Yes, 3pgc.org. Beautiful. And Cherie, I know that your website will be available because we also have a YouTube channel where this will go out there. But if you want to tell ahead of time, you know, how people can get in touch with you or to just kind of learn a little bit more about you, feel free to share that too.
Oh, thank you. Well, CherieRay.com, CherieRay.com. And there's a link to my YouTube channel and podcast and all kind of information on there too. And you can always send me an email if you have a question or if any insights come to you about the conversation. I would love to hear those too. I always just love to hear what gets awakened in other people and from this understanding, you know, stuff's going to wake up. That's the good news. And thank you, Lynn, for being the hostess with the mostest. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining and participating. We really appreciate it. So have
Thank you, Cherie.
Thank you, Cherie.
Thanks for hosting, Cherie. Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for coming.
Thank you.
It'll have
Thank
to be
you,
fun.
Cherie, and thank you, Rachel. Thank
Thank you, Sherry.
you.
Again.
Thank
Many
you,
chapters.